Hello, thanks for tuning in. This is Joe Simhart here. And for this edition of Cults in the Art Culture, I was to talk about something that occurred in 1980 in a place where my wife and I just relocated to. It's Santa Fe, New Mexico. Here's a postcard for you from the town. I lived here from 1975 until 1992 toward Christmas when my wife and I relocated to Pennsylvania. And this month we relocated back here to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's been quite a lot of work to get all that done, as you could imagine. But we're all set up, and I'm going to continue what I've been doing before here in Santa Fe. One of my first events or encounters that led to my career in exit counseling occurred here in 1980 at the DeVargas Mall. And I was set up there to do portraits for the season. And I guess it was around Thanksgiving. A young woman that worked there at the mall approached me to do a portrait from her photograph to give to her fiance. And there was no hurry in doing it. I had until after Christmas. Over the period of working there, she would stop by in the morning before the mall opened, and we would talk. And she started trying to recruit me into her religious group, which was a Foursquare Gospel local church run by a preacher, self-proclaimed prophet, that she belonged to in Santa Fe. And I had just defected or dropped out of the Church Universal and Triumphant and that system of teachings, the I Am and Theosophy, a few months before. So I was curious what she was going to tell me. And as it turned out, over the following weeks, I began to see a lot of similarities in her behavior and her group, and the way they used the Old King James Bible, similar to the way my esoteric group did. Then I began to turn around the recruitment process and ask her some questions and do some comparative notes, and told her my story of leaving this cult, Church Universal and Triumphant. And after some hours of conversation throughout the 3 weeks, she decided to defect from her group. And for a Christmas present, or for she worked in a office supply store there, she gave me this legal binder, which I've had since, and I've used, and you can see it's kind of worn out. So it's been very helpful to me. I've taken it on cases, I've written notes, and it's just been with me all this time since 1980. What happened with her, she had not spoken to her family in 6 months. They didn't know where she was. She went to college in Albuquerque. She was recruited from there into this Bible group. And the preacher had arranged a marriage to an older man, saying God ordained it between her and that older man, and that was her fiance. She broke off the engagement, obviously, after talking to me. And she reconnected with her parents after 6 months. So I hadn't heard from her. I was about to leave on a trip to India and travel around the world for a few months. I cut off my phone, and I packaged all my stuff up in my truck behind Bill Tate's Gallery on Canyon Road. So I was, in the beginning of January, I was pumping gas, and this person in the sedan calls out my name, "Hey, Joe." And I turn, and it's her, this young woman that I had helped out of the Bible cult, and her father came running out of the car, and he came over me and shook my hand profusely and said, "You're the guy that helped my daughter," and the mother came out and gave me a hug, and they were practically tearful. They were trying to get a hold of me to thank me, and I was perplexed. I just, did what I would normally do, I think, in a situation like that, share what I knew. And they decided they would want to take me out to lunch, so I went to lunch with them. They were Baptists. We prayed before eating. So she came from a legitimate Christian tradition, and ended up being recruited into one much more constrictive, much more demanding, much more authoritarian and autocratic than what she had grown up in, thinking it was closer to God and all of that. Her mother said to me that her prayers were answered. She thinks that God sent me to her daughter. And I said, well, wait a minute. At that point in my life, I didn't want to think about any God or agent sending me anywhere. I was on my own. I was sorting all of this out. And, but, it was a gracious lunch that we had, and they were very thankful, and they drove home with their daughter, who I assume would begin college again as soon as she could. Her preacher told her to drop out. It wasn't worth it because the world was going to end, and, it was an apocalyptic group. So, yeah, coming back to Santa Fe, I'm back here where a lot of this cult stuff and my cult intervention career started. And that was a significant encounter for me with this young woman that taught me a lot. And all I did there was, one, let her recruit me, gain rapport, and then shared information, which is all I've done in hundreds of cases in interventions, or at least tried to do. It worked out for the good in her mind, in her parents' mind, and in my mind. Probably from the cult's point of view, I basically was Satan interfering with God's plan. Well, I'll take that compliment. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that story of I'm back here in Santa Fe, and it's good to be back. It's a big adjustment, and my wife and I are going to go ahead and try to make a life of it here for as long as we can. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.